did I teach you?
You are welcome, no. No, you're a number one.
I can't hear you.
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one. Peace, everybody. Can everybody hear me? If so, just type it into the chat for me. Let me know if it's all good, if the sound is up. You know how things can be. Peace. Can everybody hear me? If so, excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate the support. Everybody coming through. Okay, great. Yeah, sometimes, this sound stuff, this technological stuff be wild. Thanks for everybody reaching out with the support. Once again, I greatly appreciate it. As well as everybody tuning in from different places. I was gonna play something real quick. One of my good Moors sent me this clip of him building with somebody and it was bugged out. I played it in a little while, but sometimes I forget, being on so again with eyes and ears on the ground here, we're also seen and heard everywhere, So for everybody that be tuning in from different places around the world or hearing it later, and then, again, tuning in, giving respect and support, again, I greatly appreciate it. Because nowadays there's so much so-called information that's being, touted as truth that sometimes, we have to use our discernment to figure out, what's what. So the fact that people definitely check for me and check for the stuff that myself and the Queen is doing, we greatly appreciate it. You know what I mean? Because not everybody is anchoring to the things that we're building on, because of the fact that a lot of people know and actively promote the opposite of what they know. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely want to give respect to everybody that, again, gives us support and continues to come out and let us know they out there, Yeah, matter of fact, I'm going to play it real quick. Big up to my brother, Philip Bay, who sent me this. Also, brother Shabir sent me this as well. This was crazy to me. Give me a second. Let me pull it up. This was wild. Hold up.
Absolutely.
And you're from what again?
Sure.
Okay. Brother, you said you know Aseer, the Duke of Tears?
Yes.
And C. Freeman L.
Absolutely.
And Noble Drawley.
Absolutely.
And you're from where?
I'm from West Africa.
From Burkina Faso, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I know them all from YouTube.
From YouTube?
Yes.
Thank you, brother. God bless you. I have to go.
Thank you.
God bless you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, that kind of bugged me out. Like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, because I get emails and stuff from people around, from different parts of the world and stuff. But then, like, for the average so-called person that's out here from there to shout me out or to know what we're doing really lets me know we've been doing a lot. And what we, as the so-called conscious community here in America, we really, for a long time, have been the vanguards of a lot of the forbidden information or hidden information that's kept from our brothers and sisters across the water, our cousins and kith and kin from across the water. So the fact that, they definitely give love, I definitely, feel honored behind that. Because like I said, the way that things is going now, people are starting to catch on to the fact that the information is the number one commodity in the world, and the access of that. And so because they've been clapping down so hard on our people, starting from, I would say, taking it back to when they started waging war against all of the so-called black bookstores that was here in the country. You know what I mean? Prior to them setting up Jeff Bezos and them setting up Amazon, which, by the way, they want to act like, he just created the shit in his basement and he was able to just, grind, and he then was able to get the bread up, and then, he was able to get into the stores and this. No, this nigga Jeff Bezos' father is the founder, or one of the founders, of DARPA. If anybody don't know what DARPA is, it's the number one intelligence black scientific research battery for the military industrial complex. These are the people that were creating the venom type graphene consciousness activated gel. They're the ones who started setting up the chemtrails. They're the ones that have been slowly trying to kill us and absorb us and create hybrid alien technology and human hybrids that they've been talking to us about now. So that nigga's father was definitely in that. So that means that Amazon, like I said, was definitely a military operation that they had been using to basically foster what they was going to eventually hoist on everybody else. But they used him to basically bust down the, like I said, the amount, the thousands upon thousands of black bookstores, melanated bookstores in America that was really promoting a lot of the intense knowledge that a lot of creators and a lot of lecturers and elders was putting out between um, right before the burgeoning of the internet took sway over everything. You know what I mean? And then created the whole Kindle thing. And then, like I said, one day I started talking about books, and then people started telling me how all of a sudden when they would go and try to get the books would be like $2,000, $3,000, $10,000. Like, you understand what I'm saying? But you could get the so-called digital copies in certain places for free. But then when we started to cross-reference what the digital copies were and what the original books were saying, they were two different things, because they want everything digital. They want everything tokenized so they can change it to their whim. Because as soon as you start figuring stuff out, as soon as you start knowing how to flip stuff, that's when they want to change the rules on everything, take it back out for public consumption, so that way they can figure out how to like flip it and bounce it and put it their lies into it and all of that. You know what I mean? Which is why there's so many different versions of the Bible, so many different versions of the Quran, so many different versions of the Bhagavad Gita, and whatever else that you could be using to elevate yourself outside of the mind control system that they've set up for all of us to be a part of. And humanity itself right now is actively fighting back against this predatory parasitical nature of these governments that are all illegal. You know what I'm saying? The United States government, as we understand it, has always been illegal from the time of its inception, really. When we look back at the Articles of Confederation, like I said, and we start doing the knowledge to that, like a lot of that was switched up after them people sequestered themselves in that barn and kept the regular people out, and then basically started to create laws to perpetuate themselves, call themselves the people, meaning the name of the original people that was here, and then started to create laws that would then give them right to basically wage war on all of the indigenous governments that was already here, that was already flourishing, that they then would come into, redistribute, put under a Luciferian type doctrine, and then get everybody to go along with it and repeople the ruling class or the ruling body with a bunch of Freemasons. You know what I'm saying? Who are loyal to the demonic cause of basically turning humanity into sock puppets for these artificial entities to control. And this is what has been going on for so long that I don't think that we even understand how much we think this is normal. You know what I mean? But none of this was actually normal. None of this was set up with us in mind, because it was all set up to basically turn us into, again, hosts for these entities to exist within. And because of illegal acts such as the Act of 1871, which is the Act of Congress, which was then the coup d'etat of the last vestige of the original republic, which then set into motion the rising of the fake KKK and the annexation of the land and the destruction of, again, all the indigenous governments that were already here, namely the what they want to refer to as the republic. We wind up with everything that we're dealing with now. You know what I'm saying? Because none of this stuff is actively in the best interest of anyone other than the people perpetuating themselves to be government. However, they were outed in a Supreme Court case that basically let them know that the insurgency, again, the junta that was set up within the United States to rule it, is basically illegal, which means that every law since, they would say since 1871, I would say since the establishment of the so-called organic constitution, which again would be 1871, but I think it would go back even to the time of Lincoln, in my opinion. But I may be being more exacting, you know what I mean, in the interim of that. But regardless to who or what, every order that they have created and put in ever since then is illegal. You know what I'm saying? It's illegal because they were never a real elected upon government. They themselves are a corporation posing as a government. So if everybody knows this, you understand? And this has already been proven. That means that every member of Congress, every member of the Senate, every member of the state governorship, the municipalities, the principalities, the sheriff, everybody that gets sworn into that technically is a part of the insurgency. That itself, again, was set up to disseminate and separate people from their original selves and put them under the jurisdiction of a corporate entity that was not lawfully elected and had no right to do any business on behalf of any other foreign entity that was not initially associated with their original constitution. But then, like I said, if you read books like No Treason by Lysander Spooner, you know what I mean, and other treaties written by other people of the time, you know what I mean, you would also see that they had no inherent value and no inherent ability to process what they were doing because nobody gave them authority to do it. These were just actors who set themselves up to appear as being represented by the people and thus put themselves in the position to then control the people through these illegal and malicious acts that, again, were not granted to them by anybody other than themselves, because they had descended from the original so-called insurgencies, which was the fracturing of the old empires along the familial lines of those who were a part of breaking the overall empire up in the first place, due to them wanting their hybridized children to have sway in lands that they had no connection to, based upon them being banished and exiled from those same lands. So, like, if we was to read an excerpt from that to prove, to see what I'm saying, he said the Constitution has no inherent authority or obligation. It has no authority or obligation at all unless a contract between a man and a man exists. I just put the word exists in there. And it does not so much as even purport to be a contract between persons now existing. It purports at most to be only a contract between persons living 80 years ago. So this is from 1886, I believe this book was written. So he's going back towards then. Before that, and it can be supported to have been a contract then only between persons who had already come to years of discretion so as to be competent to make reasonable and obligatory contracts. Furthermore, we know historically that only a small portion even of the people then existing were consulted on the subject, or asked or permitted to express either their consent or dissent in any formal manner. Those persons, if any, who did give their consent formally are all dead now. Most of them have been dead 40, 50, 60, or even 70 years. Again, this is going back, this was done, I believe, in 1866, 1867. And the Constitution, so far as it was their contract, died with them. They had no natural power or right to make obligatory upon their children. It is not only plainly impossible in the nature of things that they could bind their posterity, but they did not even they did not even attempt to bind them. That is to say, the instrument does not purport to be an agreement between any body but the people then existing, nor does it either expressly or impliedly assert any right, power, or disposition on their part to bind anybody but themselves. Let us see in the language is if this is right. It's language. We the people of the United States, that is the people then existing in the United States, which we already know what that is. In order to form a more perfect union, see? A union of perfect Moors, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, or do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So right there, they've already showed you two different states. You have the United States, right? So these are the states that are united to create a more perfect union. Who are these states? These were the states that were compact or connected to the original so-called Articles of Confederation, by which under that it says that was to be a perpetual union, right? Between the states that were involved in that. But not every state in the union, not every state at that time existed or was even a part of that union. You understand? Because remember, most of the states that were involved, even in the Articles of Confederation, they were all basically on the eastern seaboard. They wasn't going beyond the Mississippi River like that. They didn't get past that until Jefferson. Remember? Okay. So in that, they're saying that these United States, right, that we are assuming came out of the Articles of Confederation, which again, by way of nature, came out of the Articles of Association, because before they become a federation, they had to associate themselves with one another. Once they associated themselves with one another, then they created a confederation. That confederation from that point was supposed to be perpetual. Therefore, each state maintained its own sovereignty, and there was no so-called president. The so-called president of the union at that time was the Congress itself. That's why they called it United States in General Congress Assembled, meaning that everybody had a say within it that was a party to those contracts. But remember, while that was happening, there was a whole civilization in Cahokia that had more people associated with it and living in it than they had in places like Londinium, which we call London now. You understand? Remember, the term London comes from Londinium, and that was a province in old Rome. Remember that. So, according to that, they were supposed to be perpetuated along those lines. But those people from Londinium or Old London or whatever, they weren't of the original landmass and the original peoples that was owning everything and running everything here. Because, like I said, they had their own classical forms of government that pre-existed all of this. But let's go on. So, in that, these United States people decided that they were going to create a union for the United States of America. Something now, America, coming from Amaruca, right? Coming from Amaraca or Morocco, right? That is now the bridging of two greater bodies into one, right? It is plain in the first place that the language as an agreement purports to be only what is most really was, vis-a-vis a contract between the people then existing and of necessity, binding as contract only upon those then existing. In the second place, the language neither expresses nor implies that they had any intention or desire, nor that they imagined that they had any right or power to bind their posterity to live under it. It does not say that their posterity will, shall, or must live under it. It only says, in effect, that their hopes and motives in adopting it were that it might prove useful to their posterity, as well as to themselves by promoting their union, safety, tranquility, and liberty. Suppose an agreement were entered into in this form. We, the people of Boston, agree to maintain a fort on Governor's Island to protect ourselves and our posterity against invasion. This agreement, as an agreement, would clearly bind nobody but the people then existing. Secondly, it would assert no right, power, or disposition on their part to compel their posterity to maintain such a fort. It would only indicate that supposed welfare of their posterity was one of the motives that induced the original parties to enter into the agreement. Do we understand what's being said? So that would be like me and you today. Everybody, let's say everybody in class with me today, right? We all say that we're going to create an agreement that we're all going to pay $5 for the next 20 years to create a charity, a business or whatever. And the goal is for that money to keep that business and everything going for as long as we, the people who agreed to do this, are in existence. Once the last member of us, let's say, passes away or is no longer able to support this, then somebody else comes across and sees this document and say, hey, I like this. We're going to now pick this up. There was no energy that was written in what we wrote that gives them the right to act like they were a party to it if they weren't there at the time that it was born. This is also goes now to contract law when it comes to the birth certificate, right? When the birth certificate was signed by your parents, right, by your mother or your father, they were plaintiffs in error because they were not given the full understanding of what that birth certificate was. But even if they signed that birth certificate, right, that didn't mean that that piece of paper on that doesn't mean that that baby's whose footprint that they put on that paper is that baby. It's not. It could never be that baby because the paper did not birth the baby. The paper birthed a dead person, right? That now a fiction could be created by which they could try to bind that baby to. And the only evidence that they had of this was what? The baby's footprint, right? This is how, you see, you know how the Jews, when they get together and they have the Yom Kippur where they put all of the sins because they know that they liars, so they want to get all of their sins and all of their lies forgiven. So what do? They put all of the sins through a ritual on a goat and then lead the goat away from the people and then slaughter the goat And now everybody believes that they can now sin and lie and cheat and steal and murder for the next year because all of the sins that they have accumulated, they have now believed that they have put on this goat. This is the things that they do to get around the so-called karma that they incur because they know everything they're doing is wrong. You understand? So they create these little tricks, like with the oven of Rachni that we talked about before. They create these little tricks and these little side deals with each other to try to like absolve themselves of the negative karma that they know that they've created by creating all of these fake contracts and lies that don't really bind anybody to any of it. It's just done in a manner to make you believe that you're a party to it. But you weren't a party to it because you were not a part of the Social Security Administration when they created that up. You, in order for you to be down with it, you had to be read into the original contract. None of us have been read into the original contract of any of these contracts that they've created for us to be a part of. That's why they want you to constantly sign for everything, right? Because nobody is liable for anything, because everything that they do is based on a lie or a coercion. You understand? So if you sign for something and you haven't been read in on what it is that you're signing, that's why they tell you bullshit like, well, ignorance of the law is no excuse. It is an excuse because it's not an excuse, it's a reason, right? If I'm walking down the street and there's supposed to be a stop sign there, and then I walk and I get hit, right? And then I say, well, where was the stop sign? And for some reason, the stop sign wasn't there. The city is liable. Why? Because it was supposed to be there to give me the understanding that if I step out into the street at this time with no sign there, I could be hit, right? And they're liable because they set themselves up to be the ones that are supposed to be protecting the public safety, right? The public policy, right? But they're not, because they're negligent of their authority, because as soon as one of these people join up with one of these city or one of these civic organizations, they now become part of whatever entity that is. That's like those people who want to become good cops and then they join up with the police and now they got to sit there and protect other dirty cops, right? Half their job is not even policing. Their job is to look out for the other dirty cops that's doing all of the grimy shit that they now got to be co-signers of. And they get paid for that. But who's paying them? Allegedly, all of us. But why would you pay somebody who is there to work for you, but is there then once they get the job, they want to now lord over you and literally kill you if you don't listen to them? But their whole appearance or color of authority says that they're supposed to look out and listen to you. Do you see what I'm saying? There was no direct consent given. If Washington and them was truly the founding fathers of what they are, then why didn't they write in the Constitution, in the Supremacy Clause, anywhere that this was supposed to be a perpetual union? At least in the Articles of Confederation, they said it was going to be perpetual, but they then started abrogating that. That was good enough. So if that was good enough, why did they have to create the Constitution for the United States? Because it wasn't good enough for them to be able to keep control over everybody, because it was only good enough for the people at the time that it was created. Because ultimately, all of these things are fictions. They are legal fictions that are agreed upon so long as the services are provided by the people who have sworn oaths to protect and keep this legal fiction afloat. But if they're not even able to do that anymore, what happens? The air behind the legal fiction now is let out because they are not fulfilling their duty. They are not performing. Somebody look up the legal term of performance and put it into the chat so we can read it. When a man says he is building a house for himself and his posterity, he does not mean to be understood as saying that he has any thought of binding them,
nor is it inferred that he is so foolish as to imagine that he has any right or power to bind them to live in it. So far as they are concerned, he only means to be understood as saying that he has hopes and motives in the building it, and that they, right, or at least some of them may find it for their happiness to live in. So when a man says he is planting a tree for himself and his posterity, he does not mean to be understood as saying that he has any thought of compelling them, nor is it inferred that he is such a simpleton as to imagine that he has any right or power to compel them to eat the fruit from the tree. So far as they are concerned, he only means to say that his hopes and motives in planting the tree are that its fruit may be agreeable to them. Why? Because once somebody dies, whatever they created dies with them. You understand? Nobody was more about holding shit together or taking shit with them more than the Egyptians, right? The Comesians, or whatever you want to call them, right? Nobody. If anybody tried to take what they created with them in life, with them after death, it was them. We can agree to that, right? And still, they failed, right? How many times have we heard about tombs being found and people just running through them? Years before we even found out that these tombs even existed, niggas was running through them. Nobody can take nothing with them. Everything that you accumulate in your life potentially is going to go to someone else, right? That is a fact of life. That is the inevitability of death. So how can anything truly be perpetual other than life and death itself? Does anybody know? Thank you, Addison. Addison wrote, in legal terms, performing means fulfilling or discharging a specific obligations, promises, or duties required by contract. It involves carrying out actions, completions. Failing to perform as agreed constitutes a breach of the contract. Performance effectively discharges the party of future liability. Exactly. So, if the agreed upon thing that government says that is there to protect you, is there to preserve what you have, is there to keep your rights and everything going, and the government itself is doing the opposite of that, that means that the government has gone against its contract to perform. Correct? It is not performing. So if it does not perform, then that means that everything that it represents the discharge of its duties, they are now liable for. Correct? If we're going by what that means. This is why trusts exist. You see? Because a trust is a long-term contract that supersedes your death. This is why trusts essentially are even above constitutional and all types of other rights. Because it's something that you can dictate in your lifetime that can transcend your life and pass on to those afterwards, so long as they follow the tenets of the trust, because it's set up to be perpetual. But is the Constitution a trust? Based on what we're talking about, is the Constitution itself a trust? No. It's not. What is it? It's a contract, right? No, it can't be a trust, because we have placed trust in it and it has not performed. They have actually abrogated it. They've actually annexed it, created other versions of it to follow, and create rules and trickery so that way it looks like they're following it, but really they're following another version of it. So they're using it as a shield, right? As a Trojan horse, right? So then once they get in, they then start following something else. But it doesn't matter if they follow whatever something else is, because what they got in under is what they're still bound by. You understand? The other day, under the cover of darkness, these devils was trying to pass a FISA law to help them with their whole Israel debacle situation. So that way they could basically try to get people to be investigated in all of this, right? The number one people who was trying to vote for it was the National Black Caucus, until they got shamed by their constituencies. Then they basically paused before they could actually get it through, because believe it or not, the Democrats came through and was like, "Now this is too invasive. We're not trying to do this. This is going to basically make everybody subject to investigation by the federal government, which is an abrogation of the Constitution." Do you realize that every day they are trying to go against the very Constitution that they say that they're trying to uphold, which means they themselves are what? Liable. They're negligent. They are a part of the problem. They are the ones who are trying to go against the very document that they say binds them from doing this shit that they're doing. Why? Because these people are not even the real government. They're a part of the insurgency that took over this fake thing in 1871. This is why they went to war when we walked out of the initial Congress in 1860 in J860. Why? Because they were trying to abrogate the authority that they themselves never really had. They never even had it, because the Constitution was enforced on everyone. Because not everyone was a party to it. Because how could you, okay, let's say you're in Maine right now, right? And then you create a document in Maine that says everybody in the state, just pick whatever state that you're in right now, everybody in the state that you're in owe allegiance to Maine, right? And that everything that you are doing, you got to pay taxes to Maine. And they voted on this, right? A group of them. Some of them is not even from Maine that agreed on this, but they all got together in Maine, made this deal with each other, and then posted it on the land post or whatever. And then decided that now they had the right to go to war against you to get you to pay Maine for your property, and that you have to pay taxes to them, right? Because they wrote these laws for you, even though you don't live in Maine. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you? How is that legal? How is it legal when, if I today was to get your social security number and then create a business from it, right, without your consent, without your knowledge, make you a party to it without your knowledge, start running up the charges and all of that without your knowledge, then when I get found out, I basically try to pass the debt on to you. No, that doesn't work. You would go to jail, right? Right? Isn't that fraud? That's fraud, right? That's called doing business under a false name. You could do business under a fictitious name, but that name still got to get registered, correct? Or it's theft, right? Right, and even if it was, okay, so then Jesus Christ said, if Maine owns and has control over the others, then all is subject under Maine. Right, but they don't. They just made laws in Maine, as we're using this example. These people in Maine woke up one day, 15, 20 of them woke up one day, said they're going to make these laws, after they wrote the laws over a course of 10, 15 days, they all agreed that these are the laws that everybody in Maine was going to follow. And now, once they posted it, right, in the public square, they then said now these laws that apply to Maine, they now apply to everybody in the country. So everybody in the country is now a citizen of Maine, even though they were never a part of the initial agreement or were even present or thought about when they made that. They just flipped it after they posted it. Is that legal? Right, but even it doesn't matter if they're doing it by the sword or not. I get that. They're doing it by the sword, but that does not change the legality of it. You understand? It doesn't change the legality of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether or not they have the right to do it. You understand? They could try to force everybody to do it and force everybody through war and death and misery and all of that to do it. But it still doesn't make it legal. It doesn't make it lawful because it was still never agreed upon by everybody. It was forced on everybody. So anything that is forced on you is what? Is under what they call TCD, right? Threat, duress, coercion. That's what I tell people all the time. They're giving you a ticket, take the ticket, write TCD on it. Threat, duress, coercion. Or write non-performance on it. That's it. What are they going to say? Everything is based on a performance, right? You have to agree to perform, right? Because the theater doesn't go on unless you agree to it. So instead of making all of this problem going back and forth, just write TCD on it. So that way, if it goes any further, you already told them from the beginning. This is all under threat, duress, and coercion, which null and voids the contract right away. That's it. It can't exist because you're threatening me with murder if I don't take this piece of paper. So I'm going to take the piece of paper and sign it the way I'm supposed to when any highwayman or pirate or vagabond or ruffian or thief is trying to do something, steal something from me. I'm going to let them know that they were doing this under threat, duress, and coercion. The threat is whatever it is that you say is going to happen to me if I don't do this. The coercion is if I don't take the ticket, then you're going to arrest me. The duress is if I don't perform this way or do it like this, then you're going to try to impound my car or take me or whatever. So then you do that. And don't say nothing else. Because you still have, under their fake law, you still have the Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself or say anything. Right? The Supreme Court made another decision a while ago that says that it is the duty of the citizens, i.e. the inhabitants, the people who live here, to keep the government in line, not the government itself to keep itself in line. Why? Because the government does not exist. It is a creature, a monster of law created to pilfer and pillage and rob and rape the people whom have put themselves or have found themselves under it. That's why they fought so hard against the brutish for so long, to have their own. This is what all of that was about. This is why they fought allegedly for so long against all of this to come into a being. And it still happened because you had so-called black Freemasons, so-called white Freemasons who were linked up with the old brutish barrister who created the British accredited registry, who were also mixed up with insurgents from the destroyed Hessian Empire, right? All disgruntled paganists, occultists, who all agreed to bring about a whole society under the rule of Baal, under the rule of the hundreds. You understand? They are all under hundreds. What are the hundreds? The hundreds are the corporations, the dead entities that they needed people to become a part of. But before they did that, they had to create a charter for them to be able to map out how they were going to rule and cause as much confusion, all of that as possible. And so the book of the hundreds was created. That's why it says in the definition of man, in the definition of Moor in the Black Law Dictionary. What does it say? It said that the Moors are the bailiffs of the hundreds. Somebody look up what a bailiff is. Bailiff comes from Beylik or Baylor Bay in the Black's Law if you got it. Look up what the term bailiff means. Because whenever we think of bailiff, we always think of the people in the court, right? Who act as the mediary between the judge and the respondent or the plaintiff or the candidate or the defendant or whatever name that they have for the person that's in the theater with them. He the one that go back and forth, right? So these hundreds, these corporations at the time, whether it be the British East India Company, whether it be the Regency of Algiers, whatever our ancestors created at the time, those were meant to exist at the time. You understand? That they were doing business within their lifetime. But the goal with the corporations was that this is how they could maintain perpetual control over goods and services of people at a certain time. You understand? This is how they were able to move it forward, by creating entities that they could exist through over a period of time. According to the sources, thank you, Addison. According to the sources referencing the dictionary, Black's Law Dictionary specifically noted the summaries of its historical definitions defines bailiffs as an officer with the custody or administration of lands, goods, or chattels, or of a sheriff's deputy officer. They are responsible for the administering of justice in court, right? Such as executing court decisions, seizures, and maintaining order. But it doesn't say what kind of court. So somebody look up the term MOOR in the Black's Law Dictionary. This is why we as human beings are caught up, because the devil is in the details. The details is in the doctrines. The doctrines are all based on old revamped Talmudic BS that these small hats have instigated and stuck into everything. We created versions of these things prior to them taking control. And what they do or have always done is find ways to infuse themselves into whatever was already created. And then once they do that, they then turn everything to their advantage by first taking on the name of whatever society or group of people or whatever that they themselves have infiltrated to, or create a separate version and then get those original people castigated so that way they don't have any control anymore of their original institution, and then rewrite how that institution functions from that point on. That is how they've been able to basically amass control over everything. Basically. You understand? It has nothing to do with merit. It has nothing to do with any of the stuff that you and I think is real. These corporations function on a perpetual basis of lies and chicanery. Because again, they were able to take over your original institutions. And then once those institutions were taken, they then turned everything to their perspective. You understand? Black's Law Dictionary. A Moor is defined as an officer in the Isle of Man who summons the courts, similar to an English bailiff of the 100. See? The term mortar, confused in legal context, relates to delay, whereas Moor in this context refers specifically to this legal officer, because all of the hundreds came out of Moorish dominions, businesses, banks. You understand? They would have nothing if it was not for them. And once they were thoroughly infiltrated, they were then able to turn them into the things that they needed them to be. You understand? Let's look. They all came out. That's why you have so much property in your original names all over the place. Because we, as the original peoples, right? Whether you want to be the Amerindians or the Tamaricans or the Moors or whatever it is, right? You had or have dominion still over these lands because you cannot be taken from this land and brought nowhere else. So what they did was they turned everywhere else into corporate versions of your land and then used your name as the underwriter to be able to take possession and remake those lands in what their image is by creating fake trusts over you. You understand? Through your denationalization, and then using those as means of control over you and those lands. You understand? That's why you can have a Carthage here, and then you have a Carthage in Cartago in like Brazil, and then you have a Carthage South Carolina, and then you have a Carthage over here, and then a Carthage over there in North Africa, and you understand? Because they franchised your name. Because you are the bailiffs of the 100. So that means any court that you, under your proper person, was able to go into, you could have dominion over. So they had to incorporate you to give themselves the right to act on your behalf by taking your power of attorney, which was your name, and then gave those names to the Slavs, right? Who are now doing business as franchise corporations under these hundreds that your ancestors set up. One of the first ones was the Barbary Company. The Morocco Company or Barbary Company was a trading company established by the Sultan of Morocco and the Queen Elizabeth I of England in I-585 through the patent granted by the Earls of Warwick and Lancaster, which is also Lancaster, as well as 40 others. Now, when we look under the Moorish brutish peerage system, an earl is a title of nobility, ranking below a marquess or and above a viscount. It is a heredity title passed through the male heirs. You get that? How many black men you know named Earl? Wasn't DMX named Earl? You know quite a few Earls, right? MOOR, an officer in the Isle of Man who summons the courts for the several sheadings. The office is similar to the English bailiff of 100. Bailiff, again, is bailiff. Sheading, this is what the law says, the Black's Law say. Because remember, Black's Law Dictionary is all about dead things, dead people. It's all about things that aren't alive and used in paper. Because anything used through paper is dead. Right? Hold on, give me 1 second. Right, because everything that they're using on the paper with the paperwork is being given to dead people, given to people who are existing or functioning through or executing actions from a vacant office. Because remember, all of these people are illegal. They are part of the insurgency that took control of the country and then position themselves under the fictitious term, the federal government. The federal government, which is a fake term. Because when you say federal, you automatically think legit, but it's not. It's just a name that they use to disguise what they really are, which is a long-term insurgency that has been functioning here for the past 150 years. But let me be accurate. It would be from 1871 to 2026. How long is that? How many years is that? Because the country is only 250 years old. But of that, like I said, it was already created under dubious circumstances. So technically, other than the Articles of Confederation, everything else we've been living in is one version of 100. Sheading, riding, a tithing, or a division in the Isle of Man. Where is the Isle of Man? Off the coast of Britain, right? Why was the Isle of Man the place where they would do business? Because that's where they was importing and selling the Slavs through. That was the first Ellis Island. That's where they was marketing them and sending them through on behalf of the hundreds, on behalf of the Barbary Company that was in league with Elizabeth. Because these were all European Moors who were doing business in slavery, in mass slavery of Slavic people and people who had fallen into war with them. Thank you. 200 years. 1826, 2026. Yes. So let's say 200 years. So that means 50 years, because they marching up to 250 years this year, right? So that means of that 50 years, that last 50, that was like the only, let's say, time that we started coming back into understanding who we are. So the sheading is the riding, the tithing, or division in the Isle of Man, where the whole island is divided into what? 6 sheadings. Why is there 6 sheadings? Because of the 6 European nations: Britain, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and what do you call it? I want to say Russia, but it's somebody else. In each of which there is a coroner. See? A coroner. What does a coroner do? A coroner does forensics on a dead body, right? So somebody look up coroner in the Black's Law Dictionary and see what it says. Now, so again, we're proving what I'm saying. We're proving the fact that all of this is done under the guise of dead people. The whole summon the court for the several sheddings was summoning those who were dead legally, who had no legal standing, because these niggas didn't even have names. These Slavs that they was taken from the caves all taken from the cave, they didn't even have names. They had no standing. They had no law. They had no rights. So they were civilly dead. So these Moors was doing whatever they wanted to them. You understand? They literally owned them. For each of which there is a coroner. So for each one of these 6 sheddings, for each one of these 6 nations, which were also the 6 nations that they used to what? Invade all of us that was over here. That wasn't with none of that, right? Each of which there is a coroner or chief constable appointed by a delivery. See? Human trafficking. By a delivery of a rod at the Tinewald court or annual convention of the king, the Isle of Man. The Tinewald court, again, was where these niggas was being processed. Where they was ransoming their own daughters. Thank you, Addison. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a coroner is a public officer, often county level, right? County. Anytime you hear county, think of count. Because this is where they count the money, count the heads, count the dead people that they're making money off of. Responsible for investigating the deaths that occur under suspicious, violent, or sudden circumstances. They hold a coroner's inquest, which is a formal inquiry, sometimes with what? A jury, to determine the cause and the circumstances of the death. Now, think about that when we read it again. What is the shedding? Well, first, the MOOR, an officer in the Isle of Man who summons the court for the several sheddings. The office is similar to the English bailiff of 100. Shedding, a writing, a tithing, or a division in the Isle of Man, where the whole island is divided into 6 sheddings. Right? So this is a place where 6 or several different divisions are divided, each of which there is a coroner. Why is there a coroner? Because the coroner has to investigate the deaths, the mentally dead, those who were brought here under suspicious, violent, or sudden circumstances, the Barbary pirates, the global Caucasian slave trade that they was bringing these people through and putting them through extreme circumstances, only to be sold and shipped out to one of these so-called nations that they were repopulating, under the jurisdiction of the hundreds. It says it right here. The chief constable. What is a constable? A police officer, a policy officer, appointed by a delivery. Human trafficking. They're delivering these goods, these beings, right? To the Tinewald court for the annual convention. Who was doing this? The people who were under the jurisdiction of the Barbary Company, also called the Marocco Company, or the Barbary Company, which was a joint business venture between the then Sultan of Morocco and the Queen Elizabeth I of England, another Moor. But these Moors, right, as we say, were what? European. This is why when they say, oh, all the Moor soldiers, no, not all Moors was with it. Not everybody was with it. Not everybody was a part of the Barbary Company, which explains the wars. Not everybody was getting money off of them like that. This is where the beef came in. But the idea, as well as the collective liability as of the division, was probably known to be the ancient German peoples, as we find the same thing established in the Frankish kingdom under Clotaire. And in Denmark, who was Clotaire? Clotaire is related to Clovis. Who was Clovis? He was one of the early Frankish kings, i.e. German kings, i.e. Gaulish kings, right? Because they was all kind of in bed together. And they would take these beings, these woodwolves, these cave people that they was fighting and finding in these areas, and then flipping them to one another for different reasons. Who was doing that? Everybody that was under the British accreditation peerage system. The Earls, the Lords, the Barons, the Counts, the Viscounts. These were all Moors of so-called European descent. All of European descent. Joe said it was the Moors that brought all the women from the Georgian Slav trade that was sponsoring the German immigrants. Yes. 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 But this brings us to the Wintenagamot, or the 100 Gamot. Among the Saxons, who were the Moors, among the Saxons, a meeting of court of the freeholders of 100. Now, these are different than the bailiffs, the freeholders. This is those Moors. Okay, somebody look up the term, Addison, if you can, look up the term freeholder. What is who and what is a freeholder? The 100 Gamot. Among the Saxons, a meeting of the court of the freeholders of the 100, which asset times a year, and possess times a year, and possess civil and criminal jurisdiction and ecclesiastical powers. Thank you, Addison. According to Black Law's Dictionary and related legal dictionaries, a freeholder is an owner of a freehold estate, which is an interest in land of uncertain duration, either of inheritance, fee simple, for life. This ownership represents a free tenure as opposed to a leasehold and often implies absolute ownership rights rather than holding land under a feudal lord. This was us now. We are now the freeholders. This is the so-called American Moors, or the Moors from America. These are the freeholders who had perpetual ownership or perpetual lordship over their land because they were not necessarily under the jurisdiction of the Sultan or Elizabeth. But they were invested in the Barbary Company. You understand? So these freeholders were the ones that actually set the annual times of the years when these things would take place and how they would be paid. You see the difference? Now, they're all Moors. They're all considered Moors because they were part of this joint venture of the Barbary Company. We read in the book Morocco as it is that the Sultan of America had animals and elephants that were bigger than any of the sultans in Africa or anywhere else, and that he was in league with Elizabeth. There's a book called The Moor, the Englishman, and the Holy City, and it talks about this relationship between Elizabeth, the Moors, and everybody else. But these so-called freeholders, i.e. Moors that was already here, who already held their land, who already had their jurisdictional stuff popping, they were in league. They had businesses with these people. The same way you would invest in Google or invest in Apple or whatever today. You don't necessarily like, what's his name, Bezos or any one of these niggas, but you want to see a return on your investment, right? Hundred. Under the Saxon organization of England, each county or shire comprised of indefinite number of hundreds. See? These hundreds are the United States. These are the United States. These are the states united under the hundreds who were under the protection and jurisdiction of the original underwriters, who were the Barbary Company, the Morocco Company, the bailiffs of the hundreds, all being processed through the Isle of Man. Each hundred containing 10 tithings, or groups of 10 families of what? Freeholders or frank pledges, free pledges. The hundreds were governed by a high constable and had his own court, but its most remarkable feature was the corporate responsibility of the whole for the crimes or defaults of the individual members. The introduction of this plan of organization into England was commonly ascribed to King Alfred. What was the main plan that these niggas was trying to create? Wasn't it called the King Alfred plan? Yes, Santiel, yes. Some even selling their own daughters to the other earls and lords. Yes. Yes. This is how they were able to eventually take control. By getting everybody to get on paper with one another, to make deals, to start paying out dividends on the people that they was getting control over. Go further. Barbary Company again, the Morocco Company. You see it spelled with an A. So they talking about the real Morocco. They talking about over here. Morocco Company or Barbary Company was a trading company established by the Sultan of Morocco, the Queen of Elizabeth I, English 1585, through the patent granted by the Earls of Warwick and Leicester. This also shows you that Elizabeth and them didn't have the power, because how is it if she was the queen of everybody, how is it that it didn't go down unless she was granted a patent through the Earls? So who had more king? Who had more sway? The Earls or her? The Earls. Because the Earls were connected to the Moors. These were the Moors that were living in England or Albion. 642. The Empire of Morocco is much the largest of what? The Barbary states. Comprising of what? Ancient Mauritania. So we're not talking about Mauritania in Africa today. We're talking about what ancient Mauritania was. And we know that ancient Mauritania, according to their records, was established by King Juba, who was the son, allegedly, of Cleopatra and Mark Antony and them. And he became the first king of Mauritania. But where's Mauritania? We'll get to that in a minute. And the modern kingdoms of Morocco proper, Fez, and the other divisions. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. The country of Morocco is remarkable for its fertility, producing grain, olives, fruit in abundance. From Mr. Stevens of Georgia, the subject of the Mexican War, 1846. The stupendous deserts of the Nueces and the Bravo, Rio Grande, Del Norte, rivers are the natural boundaries between the Anglo-Saxon and the Mauritanian races. So we talk about over here. We're not talking about over there. Over there is just the extension of the lands over here, by which they extended the jurisdiction of the states, i.e. the hundreds, through the charter agreements that they created to be able to funnel people back and forth throughout the empire without them being molested. But they had a system in play through the sheriffs and the alcaides and these people who were there to make sure that these bodies weren't just turning up dead, which is why they had coroners, which is why there's only usually one coroner in every county in the so-called union. All Indian nations who, by the last treaty with America, are to be perfectly free and unmolested in their trade and hunting grounds, and to pass and repass freely undisturbed to trade with whom they please. Then get this book, Three Nations, Three Views. Right here it says the ceded country was inhabited. Ceded by who? Who ceded the country? Who signed it over? Because that's what ceded mean. Who signed it over? Did you? Did you give the right? No. There is no actual piece of paper that says that we give this land to these people. All of those treaties that they say William Penn and all these niggas had, they were all compact treaties under the main treaty, because all of this happened after the establishment of the Morocco Company, of the Barbary Company, of the Book of the Hundreds, of all of this. So it all was still property of those who were on the land, who was us, who were the freeholders in the deal, because we wasn't under nobody else's jurisdiction. Even the Sultan, as great as he never had particular group control over any one group of Moors. He didn't. Only the ones that was in what they called the Bled El Mazkin. Yes, the Bled El Mazkin, which is those under the Sultan's direct district or direct jurisdiction. He didn't have control over the Bled El Siba, those who were outside of those jurisdictions. No. So everybody had respect for the Sultan. They seen him as a spiritual leader and head of the whole thing, but he couldn't directly tell each one of them what to do. No, he didn't have that power because there was more than one. Because each dominion had its own, shareholder, or had its own individual that was in control over that jurisdiction. That's why in the Circle 7 it says, what is the title of our ruler in Morocco? The Sultan. Right? But Morocco is a vast land, y'all. It's vast. It wasn't just one dude who everybody had ultimate no. It was a group of them. Just like you had a group of beys. Just how you had more than one sultanate. Just like you had more than one government. They always want to make it seem like everybody was under one. No. We had one universal banner that we was all, in alliance, in agreement with, but not everybody was under the same joint, man. That's the beauty of it. That's why we got into it. So that way we wouldn't all have to be under the jurisdiction of one person. Because one thing the Moors like, or humanity like, is what? Freedom. So who want to give up their own individual freedom to go under what somebody else say? Especially as hard-headed and thing as our peoples are. What tenets of the Moorish Science Temple of America? Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, equality. Right? So freedom don't mean you get to tell me what to do. Freedom is I agree, or we agree on what should be done. You understand? You didn't declare your nationality. You didn't get into this knowledge of self so that way you could have some other nigga telling you what to do. What's the purpose of that? I self law and master. Right? That's the first constitution that we follow. Nobody tell you how to stand up, right? Nobody taught you how to do that. You figured that out yourself after a certain time of maturity from a baby. Nobody could teach you how to walk. You had to figure it out. Name one person on earth who parent taught them how to stand up and walk. Do you know one? Do you know anybody? Even if they show you, look, this is how you do it. You got to do it. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody taught you that. Nobody taught you, oh, well, it's not right to hit your mother. It's not right to curse that. You just know that. You just certain shit you know. You understand? That's the difference between us and these cave people and these other people. We know better. You understand? That's how you know we're the original people. That's how you know we was the ones who was the ones originally teaching this. We didn't figure it out. We didn't have to be told we're not supposed to have sex with our parents. No, you understand? That's just something that you instinctively know when you were born upright. The only reason why you know your name is because somebody called you that. You didn't have the right to claim your own name. Why you think people, when you got knowledge of self and you wanted to be called of a different name, people got mad at you? Namely, the people who named you. Why? Because now you were free enough to decide that you wanted to be called something else. And because they themselves did not feel free enough to decide what their own name is, how dare you, right? How dare you come up with a name that's not one that I sanction for you? That's slavery. Now, again, I'm not saying you need to change your name. I'm not saying none of that. I'm just saying that you, as an individual, have the freedom, or are supposed to have the freedom, to evolve and change into the being that you want to be. This society says you can only be as free as those who help create you allow you to be. Why? Because they took the freehold position from you and put you under the jurisdiction of someone else. Here go the proof. The ceded country was inhabited by numerous tribes and nations of Indians who were independent of both of us and of the Americans. They were the real proprietors of the land, i.e., the freeholders, and we had no right to transfer to others what did not belong to ourselves. This injustice was greatly aggravated by the consideration that those aboriginal nations had been our faithful allies during the whole of the contest, and yet no stipulation was made in their favor. Contrary to popular belief, the Spanish amalgamated Moors did not drive the Moors out of their country. It was a territorial purchase between two royal families. The Caliph Abdel Zagal, Boabdil's uncle, and Queen Isabella I, the amalgamated Moor, for 5 million Mataverde, which is $17 million, on November 25th, I-491. A legal procedure no different than the Treaty of Louisiana and Florida, which were land purchases only. It had no jurisdiction over the people who were on the land because those people were already free. They existed as they were prior to both of those royal families existing on the land, which means their descendants have the same or had the same freedom, which is why you cannot be deported nowhere if you're born here, because you are still a party to all of these contracts, because they only function based upon you being held in trust under a power of attorney that's assigned to a contract that they are calling the Constitution of the United States of America, which is different than the United States and and the Articles of Confederation, which were to create a more perfect union, a union of perfected Moors. Let's prove it further. George III of Great Britain, in the name of God, the all-merciful, the commiserating God, on whom is our account, we acknowledge his support. He's talking about God now. For there is neither beginning nor power, but that which proceeds from God, the high eternal God. Now, this is translated in English, so it's probably talking about Allah, right? From the servant of God, the commander of the faithful in Muhammad, upheld and supported by the grace of God. So that's God. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times he didn't invoke God. See? Why 6? because of the several sheadings, the six sheadings from the 6 nations that they're in league with. Suleiman, the son of Muhammad, son of Abdullah, son of Ishmael, prince of the house dynasty of Hassan. Remember that Hassan, who was ever upheld by the power of God, Sultan of Fez, Morocco. See Morocco with an A. So you're talking about over here. And Sus, the Draha, and the Tafilet, and the Tioat, together with all the territories of the West. So we only talking about over here. Right? Look what he said. To our dearly beloved, cherished, exalted by the power of God. So that's 7. The Sultan, George III, Sultan of the territories of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, Ireland, the Duke of Mecklenburg, Sterlitz, Prince, descended from the dynasty of the Sultans of Rome and Palestine. We hear that. He didn't say Israel, did he? No. He said the Sultan of Rome and Palestine. So this is what I'm saying, how when they say that Rome was fake and all that, this is what I'm saying. These were redrawn names of places and beings and people who had to fit the new narrative of what they wanted the world to perceive the future history to be. Because all of these are Moors he's talking about. And he's calling King George, the Christian king, he's calling him the Sultan. Okay? So that deads all of this. The Moors weren't English and the English was all under the Moors. They was all in concert together. The Moroccan Moors and Britain. Because this goes back, this is after the establishment of the Morocco and the Barbary Company. And this is the king writing him and telling him, look, we know that you're sick. We promise to inform you that we make diligent inquiry about you, desiring heartily that you may be at all times surrounded by health and prosperity. I thought they was at war with each other. I thought that there was this beef with each other. No. We wish you to increase in friendship with us, that our alliance may be more strongly cemented than heretofore, even stronger than it was in the days of our ancestors, from whom God guards and protects. God 8 times now. Now, therefore, we make known to you that your physician, Dr. Buffet, has been in our royal presence, which is exalted, and by the bounty of God, 9 times God, and we have been all pleased with his medical knowledge and diligent attention. See what I'm saying? So what we call the conquest or the fall of the Roman Moorish Empire, or fall of the Roman Empire, this was all just business transactions from one aspect of the company, shareholders or freeholders going to another aspect of the company, being transferred back and forth between each other. And like we said in the last class or the class before that, when we talk about the ages, this was going on for ages. It had been this way. And we know an age is over 2,000, is over 1,000 plus years. Right? All of this was connected. All of this to them was Morocco. All of this was Africa. Okay? Europe did not exist. Europe is West Asia. Europe came into being after the company started to go into free fall, and it started to go into hostile takeover situations. So they started to read and cook the books and started to redistribute property and land rights and land titles, so that way they could start to bag up and keep the freeholders as hostages in their own land. And so had to create a fictitious doctrine that said that they had been imported from somewhere else. Hence, they started to create all of these fake slave manifests and slave doctrines, when they was really just moving people from one side, from the mainland to the Caribbean. So Africa becomes Brazil. So Brazil, parts of Brazil become Africa. Parts of the Mississippi get known as the Atlantic Ocean. Like, this is what they're doing. The same thing they're doing today when they're hiding all of the money that they flipping on y'all and saying that they don't know where any of this money going. Everybody following? It's our perception that is being manipulated based upon what we've been taught things are, as opposed to what they really are. Nothing is new. They just redistribute the energy and then turn it in on itself. Paint new pictures of it, put somebody else's name on it, put a decoy on it, so that way they can keep control of the estates. So again, when they say, "Oh, well, the Moors did this," and which ones you talking about? We're all mixed up. All of us was put under. Our ancestors put bread up for a lot of this. It had dominions and lands all over this place, all over the world, because it was a global situation, and everybody was making bread. Everybody was getting money. You understand? Everybody was doing a thing, man. And then after a certain time, another group wanted to create a hostile takeover over another group, and so they started using proxies, started giving proxies their names, and then started redistributing where these proxies had jurisdiction over. And everybody that wasn't with it basically fell under their sword. And then once those lands was taken, they used their amalgamated family members to basically squat in those properties and act as landlords while they displaced the original bailiffs. You understand? See this dude right here? This dude right here on the left, this is referred to as American. Merikinz. They were called Americans. Look them up. Right here. Right next to him is an ancient German. Another Black Knight, noble of the Holy Roman Empire of Germany, founded 800 AD by Charlemagne, another dark-skinned Moor, who was purposely falsely identified as Saint Maurice. They want you to think that every Moorish figure that you see in England, no matter how he looked, was all depicting of the same person. This is how stupid they think we are. So all of these pictures of the Saint Maurice, the nigga who got his head cut off, who, by the way, was Egyptian from Thebes. The original seal with the wild turkey on it. The old Aztec rendering of the double-headed. This is how far back this thing go. The wild turkey or the mystic Turk is the great seal, the original United States Republic. This right now allegedly is still in St. Paul's Chapel. It was first painted there in St. Paul's Chapel in I-789. Right? The first place that so-called George Washington prayed for the United States covenant. The original hallowed consecrated ground of so-called American liberty. At least that's what they say it is. Another group that we had in Louisiana was the Regency of Algiers. It's another company. That's why Louisiana was divided up into parishes, because it was coming through the old Gallic line that they now call French. France, when you look at the oldest maps of France, France is just a small little like province in a place called Gallia or Galicia. After the three Napoleons, then France becomes a thing. So France is really Gallia or Galicia. Galicia and Gallia is where you get Gaul from. From Gallia, Galicia, Gaul, then you get France. But France at one point was just a little pink, small, one of the smallest counties within that area. But they messed up that history so much, it's hard to like put it all back together. But essentially, that's what's up with that. But one of the biggest ones they set up was, forget this picture right here. This is just a decoy. The original bailiffs was, of course, Moors. Look at the flag. These are Moorish flags right here. The Bey of Tunis was the ruler of the Beylik of Tunis, de facto dependent state within the Ottoman Empire, 1705 until the establishment of a French protectorate in 1881. The term Bey refers to the monarch, right, who ruled under the Hossanid dynasty. After the protectorate was established, the Bey retained largely symbolic role. The last Bey was Muhammad al-Alamin, right? The Regency of Algiers was the early modern semi-independent Ottoman Dominion's nominal vassal state in the Barbary coast of North Africa. Now remember, North Africa is, prior to the fake maps and all of that, is everything on the northeastern seaboard, as we can see here from the CIA map. You see? So Grenada and all of that, Mauritania and all of that is in the western portion. All of this on the northeast. In the middle right here is taken from the CIA internal map from 1998. So when they talk about Fez, the Draha, Casablanca, Marrakesh, all of this was considered that under the ancient dominions. And then all of these were the maps of the barbarous nations or tribes that existed within that jurisdiction that they now call American Indians. All of these were freeholders in the original compact, which is why they came over here, which is why after Salvador Vaco, aka Christopher Colon, came over here after the so-called fall of Granada, they was basically coming in reverse. They were taking control over the extended hundreds that still had connection to that. But eventually he started finding out what was happening. He set up a separate duchy called El Salvador after him, and then he started to rebel against the amalgamated Spanish that was now trying to extend the jurisdiction over the people instead of the land. And then he wound up getting locked up and removed. Boom, 1586, 1830, founded by the Moorish Barbarossa brothers, Arouj and Harenda Reis, also known as the Barbarossa brothers. They were the great grandsons. They were the great grandsons of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa of Germany. See? Moors all around one another. God, shit is trash. The regency succeeded in the Talmencan kingdom, and as of the infamous formidable base that was waged maritime holy war on the European Christian powers. You see, because the Christians was trying to now extend through the Spanish. And the regions headed for stratocracy that haunted the European imagination for 3 centuries, but still gained recognition as the barbarous regional power. The regency emerged in 16th century as the Ottoman Habsburg War self-proclaimed Ghazis, gaining popular support and legitimacy from the religious leaders at the expense of the hostile local emirs. The Barbarossa brothers and their successors carved a unique Moorish Ottoman Khorasan state that drew revenue from the political power amidst naval warfare against Habsburg Spain in the 17th century. See what I'm saying? This was the time when the wars was fighting, when they called the Barbary Wars or the Moorish Wars that were continuing, because these were hostile hundreds that was trying to fight the original jurisdictions that was set up. When the wars between Spain, Roma, the Ottoman Empire, the Kingdom of France, which was connected to the Washita, Dugdamandia, Maison de Rouge, and what they now call the Empire of Haiti, the Kingdom of England, the Brutish Moors, and the Dutch Republic, who was connected to the Carthagese confederacies, ended, the Barbary corsairs started capturing merchant ships and their crews and their goods from these states. When the Ottomans could not prevent these attacks, the European powers negotiated directly with Algiers, because they were the freeholders over here. Isn't Algiers in Louisiana? But they don't want to deal with none of that, because again, that then places us outside of the whole slave situation, because all of this was us fighting each other for land claims and different positions within basically the global corporation or hundreds that we all was getting money out of, which then led to the creation of these fictitious states on paper, that the paper was now being used to infringe on the rights of the living people. And once there was enough people getting fought and captured and beat down and enslaved in prisons of war, they started to proxy the wars by arming the slaves, giving the slaves guns. And then that continued on until the slaves was able to flip the decoy situation for themselves. And then, like I said, through the occult mechanisms, because on the back doors, you had all of these people who were also part of these different political secret society organizations. They now had to get together and figure out how they were going to basically rule and take advantage of it. And so that's what they did. This is when the Genovese and the Medici and the Orsini and the Aldombradi and all the rest of these Roman Moors started to use these decoys and these banking families and started to empower the Khazars. Because the Khazars was willing to do anything not to go back to the damn caves. So they empowered them to do whatever they needed to do to help displace the rest of us. And it's been happening that way ever since. So when they talk to us about all of these Europeans and these Native Americans, all of them niggas is slaves. All of them niggas came over here on boats. All of them niggas was imported. None of them niggas had their own jurisdiction over nothing but huge tracts of empty land. And they was running because they was being hunted. Remember we read about the hunting grounds that the free people was having? Who you think they was hunting? They was hunting these niggas. That's what was really going on. And so they all was fighting for their own freedom against the rest of us. So all of these pictures that we see that we think is Native Americans and them and you know they worship the corn and you know worship the mountain sky god and the mountain god and all of this crap living in squat. They was all squatters because none of them niggas was from here. Only ones that's from here is the dark skinned ones like this one right here. That's Big Chief what was his name? The one that's in the Circle 7, I mean the Clock of Destiny. Calvin Coolidge, who was a Rothschild. A Red Shield. I showed you the picture of all in the 60s of all of the Indian chiefs dressed up like civil rights leaders. That also helped sell us out. This is where all these niggas learned how to be Mohawk and Choctaw and all this other type of crap they call themselves now. All of that is predicated on the fact that none of them niggas from there. So once they got all of them and they displaced most of us through all of this other stuff that was happening, that's when this happened. That's when they started getting they stories together, and then they created this whole fake story about the noble savage and the wounded warrior Indian and all of this crap. And then they got a bunch of photographers to start taking pictures of these niggas. And then they put the pictures in a book like they was always from there. When all you got to do is ask ChatGPT, big up brother Sirhan on Facebook. He posted this. Yes, there are instances of historical photography where the individuals who were not Native American, including people of Asian descent, modeled as Native Americans, particularly in stage studio photographs, theatrical productions, or Wild Wild West shows during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. That's where all of these niggas came from. This is a wig. These niggas wearing wigs. They not even from here. None of this. This was all given to them to go along with the story. And we fighting over, oh, well, the Moors was here and the whatchamacallit was there. How come nobody fighting these niggas? How come nobody stepping to these people en masse? This is the problem. We always got our guns pointed at each other instead of pointed outward. We supposed to circle the wagons and keep these people at bay. But we not. Because we still fighting over who's going to be what and who's what. When in the real story is the black ones and the white ones is working together to keep us at bay, to keep all of us disenfranchised so that way they can keep control of the holding companies that got all of our names and everything's associated with these dead corporations that don't even have the right to function. That's what's happening. That's why they don't want you to declare a nationality. That's why they don't want you to find out who and what your original name was prior to the slavery and all this other crap. That's why. Because then you now get access to what is supposed to be left for you that they, up until now, have been utilizing against you. We are the only ones debating this crap. We are the only ones going back and forth with each other about how we not here and which one was this one, and you know what I'm saying? And then you got the ones that then starts to base all of this on Christianity and religion when this has nothing to do with any of that. We didn't have a problem with religions. As I just showed you, the Sultan of Morocco acknowledged the the king of England as the Sultan of Palestine and Rome, knowing that they were so-called Christians. So it wasn't no religious beef like that. The religious beef started once the proxy people started using that as another means to keep us disenfranchised from one another. We are our own worst enemy because we keep looking at everybody else as our savior when it's really only us. Like I said, all of this is why none of us can be deported nowhere if we're from here. They can't afford to do that. So once we realize that we're not the paper, that the paper has no jurisdiction over us because the people using the paper to have this jurisdiction don't even have the right to use any of it because they are part of the insurgency that was set up to keep everybody apart from their estates. So until the so-called American populace realizes that, Donnie and the small hats going to keep doing what they're doing. Anybody have any questions? For more on this, you can get the book Ancient and Modern Britons. You can get the book At Mortium Matia Matria May by Prince Uriel Bey. Get the Consecrated Talismans, volumes 1 to 3. OS Economicus. What else? Rebels, Pretenders, and Imposters. Blacks Before America by Hyam. That's another one. Ancient Wisdom and Secret Sex. The Wars in Barbary. America BC. The Knights Templar in the Golden Age of Spain. African Presence in Early Europe. Othello's Children in the New World. Founding Brothers, The Revolutionary Generation. History of Edom and Khazaria, The Other Israel. Falasha Anthology, The Black Jews of Ethiopia. Africa and the Discovery of America. Servants of Allah. The Astrological Secrets of the Hebrews, of the Hebrew Sages. Moorish Spain. Morocco as it is. African Presence in Early Asia. Oh, nah, more. That's a good joint. Let me see. I have it real quick. Yeah, all of this stuff was about business, man. They get us caught up in the race aspect of it too much, and we get bogged down with that and don't realize what's really going on. That's for a reason. They want us to stay plugged into it always being about race. when it was really us fighting each other and then using these other fictitious races as a means of control over one another. That's what's really happening. So the quicker we break out of that spell, the better or easier it's going to be for us to recalibrate and reestablish our own independence outside of all of that. That's why we keep getting beat. Not to mention the social engineering that's broken down the so-called Moorish American psyche to the point that we don't even see each other for what we are. We just see each other as enemies of one another. That's where they want. They've degenerated us to the point that, we've allowed ourselves to be degenerated to the point that we don't even see how far we've fallen. We think this dysfunction that we see in our communities and amongst our men and women is normal, and it's not. It's sick. Where is it at? Okay, here we go. Oh, here we go, more. Brother Santiago sent us this. Exactly. That's not gonna work. You know what she doing. Mm-hmm. That's how she gonna point. That's how she gonna get back at homie. Brother Santiago sent us this. See, we got Morocco. Morocco. See? Right here. Big up to the brother Santiago sent us this. See it, right? What's that? Look, Macau right here. MOOR, right? MOOR, they're north. The Moors of the north. Yeah, but right here. Thanks for that, Moor. Yeah, right here. Not to mention all of the other ones we've been showing. Anybody have any questions before we close out? Here go the other one the brother sent us. Yeah, I'm going to show this one right now, Mo. What'd that say? MARRACAACOU, right? There it is. Oh, there's no Morocco in America. Morocco is over there. Exactly. Exactly. Right here. Brother found this in the library. Right down here in Andalusia. AKA the Isle of Flowers. Italia. See? Spaniola. So-called Haiti. See? Carthage. Carthagena. plain sight. Morocco, right at the top, right on the northeast or southeast coast. See that? Again, this Moore found this in the library, just in the library one day, like, oh, word, look at this. On the wall in the back section. Nobody paid attention. What is the basics of burial? Don't know the spelling. Worm. Does it go to the extreme actions? Burial or burial? Burial. Don't know the spelling. Worm. You mean the vril? The vril worm? Yeah, that's dealing with the Germans and the Thule. That's the worm that they said that they put into the Caucasian females that started to drive them more crazy, where they started to basically have sex with them and then started to use them as a means of procreation, because the worm would then be infected in them and then it made them lust them like crazy, because they was infected with this so-called real worm that had been cultured in the by the alchemists of so-called Germany, or in the Gran Canarios, in the islands where they was germinated at. So that's what they said that they was using, or where they came from. A book on that is, where's it at? Adolf Hitler, The Financial Vipers of Venice. Get that book. They talk about that in there. Adolf Hitler, The Last Avatar by Miguel Sereno. Get that. I think it's in there too. They make touch on it in a book called The Ark of Christos. The Ark of Christos by a dude named William Henry. They touch brief on that. There's another book called The Vril Technology. I believe Peter Nichols wrote a joint on that as well. Also, The Crystal Halls of Christ's Court, another book by William Henry. That's about the Moorish Cathars and Atlantis and the Holy Grail and all that. But yeah, the vril worm, that's that worm that they said that they was putting in them cracker chicks, and it started to basically drill within their brain. And you know how these worm parasites can start to control you, and that's what started to happen. So when Moors was going at them, like, you having sex with these animals, like, what are you doing? And they couldn't see beyond their lust. That's what Othello was about. That's why Othello went so crazy with Desdemona, because he also was suffering from the epilepsy, which was another byproduct of that worm that got these niggas tripping. And you could see evidence of that today, which is why you see these niggas getting clapped out and murdered by their own subjects, because again, they know not from which they come. So you get homegirl get murked after making all of these posts about how great Caucasian men and what you call it is, how much better, right? Come to find out that there's other people involved, that there might have been a whole big ritual just to kill this chick. Mm-hmm. That's nice. Oh yeah, I know that too. All because they don't know their history. But again, it's passed down through the mother, through the father, by creating these fake delusions of grandeur that white people are so much better. And because we have basically been dehumanized or allowing ourselves to become a criminal race over the past 80 years, we wound up with situations like this, not realizing that these niggas is the ones that came from the bottom, and now they here. So it's our perspective that gotta raise, instead of trying to get them to raise up to us. Anybody have any other questions? Yeah, this is the mother of that chick. So you already see the moms was already with that, encouraging her to go the opposite route. So she get murked by this white man. He get murked by this white woman. Who is coming up on top? These white people. Daughter of the American Revolution, Scottish Rite, some shit. Because all these secret societies is working together. They all working together. They do not have our best interest in mind. I don't give a damn what you niggas say. None of y'all have proved that any of these secret societies have done anything to move our people forward any more than anybody else, because they haven't. But of course, y'all gonna say that they do because y'all want to make it seem like, because y'all are part of it, that there's something positive happening from it, and it's not. That book is called the Crystal Halls of Christ Court by William Henry. Another book you can get is The Algonquin Conquest of the Mediterranean Region, 11,500. Another good book is the genealogy of the Imperial Dragon Court and Count Dracula by Prince Uriel Bey. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so again, I really give praise and honors to you guys for coming through and listening to what we're saying. Also, get a copy of, I'm going to try to put it on the app for free so you guys can have the app and get it. It's called No Treason, The Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner. It's a really good read, and it gives you a good perspective on how to set up certain trusts and how to go against the stuff that these people be trying to get us through this paper empire stuff they've been rocking on us and getting us bogged down in paperwork, not realizing that that's us still fighting with them in their arena. If everything is based on a claim, then that means that every claim that they put on paper has to be proven. And the first proof is that the paper is more important or more prevalent than you as a living being. And no paperwork can stand as representative of a human being, of a flesh and blood living soul, man or woman. It can't stand in your place. You can only stand for it. So if that's the case, then once you negate that it exists, they have to prove that the paper is the lifeblood of you, and they can never do that because no piece of paper has ever given birth to a human being. That paper can only give birth to dead beings, period. And if you are alive, then they are trying to force you to associate with a piece of paper. They are trying to get you to do business under a false name. They being the same ones who don't have jurisdiction because they are part of the insurgency that the United States refers to as the Union of the United States. So we can trace that, and if every violation that they have committed as that corporation that uses barristers to this day, that's violating its own 14th and 13th Amendment, then they do not have standing. They do not have standing, then that means that they cannot operate, because that would violate the same so-called constitution that they say that they are under. So if they are saying that they are bound by that constitution and they violate that constitution, then that means what? They do not exist and cannot exist as real people. As creatures of law associated with that doctrine, because that doctrine does not exist. It only exists as a agreed upon action. And if you do not agree and they cannot prove the claim, then that means then that they have lost standing. If they do not have standing, they cannot enforce anything. And once the claim is properly challenged based on the law of blood, right? Just sanguineous, they don't have any standing with that. Not to mention that all of that paperwork is got your name on it in some form or fashion. So all of these brothers and sisters that's out here dehumanizing themselves, listening to all of this slut rap, listening to all of this gangster rap, always watching TV shows where the black people is gay or lesbians or criminals or whatever, and this is what you think the entertainment is, they have turned your destruction into their entertainment. And they have more than enough people that look like us that's willing to perpetuate that in order for them to get a check, which means that they will do anything, see what I'm saying, to make you look like an animal so long as they get paid. So that means that them people is our enemies too. Actors are liars. You understand? Actors are liars by trade. You understand? So that's that. Anybody have any other questions? If not, please check out www.aseertheducateers.com. Also, www.cordobaorganics.com. Check out those books that we gave up. If you guys want to hit me up for any consultations or anything like that, hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. And yeah, check out the books that we got up there. I greatly appreciate it. And please, if you haven't, please subscribe to the ADOT app. It's on Google and Apple Play right now, if you haven't already. And thanks to all my subscribers, as well as please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Big up to all of my listeners in Burkina Faso and Africa and London, Canada, anywhere, Germany, anywhere that they're allowing the feed to go. Because when I look at my analytics and stuff, they don't even show me Africa. So that's how I know they definitely manipulating my page, because I don't see none of that. You know what I'm saying? So again, honest to you guys for the support. I really appreciate it. And again, if you need anything or whatever, just hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. All right, y'all. Peace.